Hello and welcome to another quiet unfolding of the past. Tonight we travel back, not just centuries, but thousands upon thousands of years, to a time before books, before bricks, before roads or names we can still pronounce. A time before written history, before the idea of history itself. The world was colder then, wilder, quieter in some ways, but also filled with the steady rhythm of human lives. Carried out under low skies, around fires of animal fat, inside homes made of earth, bone, and silence. This episode is not about kings or pyramids or ancient battles. It is about mothers. Mothers who lived in the mud, in cold winds, in narrow spaces, long before cities, long before medicine, long before anyone thought to write down what a mother did in a day. We do not know their names, but we know their traces. A worn groove in stone, where grain was ground for hours, a grave holding a child, and beside it, a tiny clay figurine, a hearth that still smells faintly of old ash and animal hair. So if you're lying down, gathering your breath, feeling the quiet around you begin to grow, then let us walk gently into their world, not as it was told to us in textbooks, but as it may have felt, to the people who lived it. Tonight, we begin with a woman, a Neolithic mother, and the quiet labor that shaped all of human history. The wind outside the hut is low and dry. It hisses through grass, whispers over packed dirt, and stirs the edges of a worn fur pelt that hangs across the doorway. Inside, the air is warmer, but heavy. Heavy with the smell of old smoke, wood ash, damp soil, and the faint sweet temps of fermented milk. A fire has been smoldering since the night before. It is never allowed to go out. She wakes early to feed it. Not because she chooses to, but because the baby has stirred. Again, the fire is weak, so she blows into the embers. Her breath is soft, rhythmic, practiced. The baby shifts on the sleeping mat, wrapped in a scrap of wool tied loosely across her chest. The other children still sleep, huddled together. One has wet the fur beneath him. She will clean it later, maybe. Her body is tired, in ways that are difficult to describe. Her legs ache, though she has not walked yet today. Her back feels as though it is folded in on itself. She kneels beside the flat stone, or grinding stone, and begins. It is the same motion she has done every day for as long as she remembers. Hold the upper stone. Push it forward, draw it back, forward and back. It makes a dry, crunching whisper, seeds cracking. Skins tearing, grain breaking down into dust. Her knuckles scrape against the stone. She ignores it. The child at her chest nurses again. She leans back slightly, adjusts, and continues grinding. Later, she will walk to the edge of the settlement, where reeds grow along a slow-moving stream. She carries a woven basket. It is patched with sinew and bark. As she walks, she watches the ground. It's always watching. For roots, for stones, for snakes, for tracks. She does not speak. There's no one to speak to right now. Only the child, now tied securely to her back. Small fingers tug at her shoulder. She finds a few plants. She digs them out slowly, not to damage the roots. She gathers them into her basket. There is a beetle on one. She flicks it off. The sky overhead is pale, not cloudy, but thin. A single bird calls from the trees. It echoes, and is gone. When she returns, she has missed the morning gathering. The others have gone to check traps. 2 skin hides. 2 shape new tools. She brings her basket to the hearth. She sits, and she chews on a stalk of reed to clean her teeth while the baby sleeps in the sling. A cousin arrives. She is also carrying a child. They do not speak at first. Just sit together, shoulder to shoulder, hands resting in their laps. A boy comes to the doorway, bloody around the nose. Fell while playing near the goat pen. She takes him by the chin, wipes the blood with a wool scrap, shushes him, gives him a piece of dried root to chew. He forgets. There is always more to do. Water to be boiled, grain to be mixed with ash and rolled into cakes, flat stones to heat, dried berries to mash. Every task takes time. None of it feels urgent. But none of it can be skipped. In the afternoon, she goes to the edge of the fields. Not the kind of fields you imagine. No rows, no fences. Just patches of worked land, touched gently by hands and stone tools, year after year. She checks for shoots, pulls up weeds, leaves a little spit on the earth to press a seed into the mud. The rhythm of her days is slow, repetitive, endless. She does not expect rest. She does not ask for help. No one does. When the sun begins to fall, the hut fills again. The children are louder now. Someone brings in dried meat. Someone else coughs for too long. A neighbor comes by to ask for kindling. She gives it. She braids her hair for sleep. Not for beauty, just to keep the lice from spreading again. She tucks the baby between furs, lies down. The fire is still burning. A low orange glow in the dark of the hut. The air smells of wood smoke and goat. Her hands are raw. Her back hums. She closes her eyes. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after. A quiet struggle, lived in silence. A life of labor, not remembered in stories, but carried across centuries in the bones of those who came next. And now, as the rhythm of daily life softens into memory, we turn our gaze to something more still, more silent, more lasting. A single body, curled gently in the earth, wrapped in red pigment beneath a floor once warm with fire and breath. She is known to us only as the woman of Cataluk. Cataluk is a name from long after her time. It is what archaeologists call it now, a place of layers, of houses built upon houses, of walls without doors, of rooftops used as streets. Lies in what is now central Turkey, a flat and windswept plain, where grain once swayed like golden smoke beneath skies of endless gray-blue. This was once among the largest human settlements of its age, over 9,000 years ago. Before writing, before kings, before the wheel. And there, buried beneath the floor of her own home, they found her. She was not young, nor terribly old. Likely in her 30s or 40s, an age many never reached. She was buried on her side, knees drawn up to her chest, hands near her face, as if still sleeping. Her skull was intact, her teeth worn flat. The edges of her joints told of years spent kneeling, grinding, lifting. Her bones bore no signs of violence, no grand disease, just wear, time, labor. And life, beneath her hips, was a small vessel of clay. Beside her, a scattering of obsidian flakes, sharp as glass, gleaming even after all these millennia. Her body had been sprinkled with red ochre, a soft, earthy pigment. Iron-rich, the color of blood, or soil, or something in between. Why, we do not know, but we can guess, we can feel. The people of Cataluk buried their dead beneath their homes, under sleeping platforms, under hearths, under the floor where new children would someday play. Death was not sent away. It was kept close, folded into the rhythm of life. Perhaps the red ochre was not for the dead, but for the living. A way to mark the sacred, a way to soften grief, a way to color silence. Her skeleton told many things. She had once borne children, we do not know how many, whether they lived, or whether one of them pressed her eyes closed before the soil was laid across her shoulders. Her spine curved gently to the right, a long, slow bend, likely from years of carrying burdens always on the same side. Baskets, babies, wood. There was no grave marker, no name, just the place, just the stillness, the pigments left behind. She is not unique. Dozens of women were buried this way, some with beads, some with tools, some with nothing. Hers was among the best preserved. Her skull was later scanned, measured, reconstructed into a soft model of what her face might have looked like. Strong, broad, with eyes slightly downturned, and a quiet mouth that may have spoken a language we will never hear again. She has become, in modern eyes, a symbol of Neolithic womanhood, of the first matriarchs, the hearth keepers, seed planters, grain grinders, world sustainers. But to those who lived alongside her, she may have simply been a sister, a neighbor, a mother, a woman who made good bread, helped during births, who knew when to harvest bitter roots, who sang the children to sleep. The woman of Cataluk did not write poems, but she left lines, etched not in stone, but in habit, in the curve of her shoulder, the thickness of her fingers, The way her knees bent after decades of kneeling on packed clay floors, in that ancient city of no streets, where people climbed through roof holes and passed food across rooftops, she lived as many lived, and she died. Not as a mystery, but as part of the rhythm of days, seasons, generations. And now, so many years later, you carry her story. A quiet story. Folded into the soil, colored with ochre, held together by the quiet work of her hands. The ground holds many things. Not just bones, but stories. Questions. Symbols once familiar, now worn smooth by time and silence. Across the early Neolithic world, from Cataluk in Anatolia to distant caves in Spain, burial sites whisper the same strange detail. It's a soft layer of red dust sprinkled over the dead. Red ochre, an ancient pigment. Ground from earth, rich in iron, streaked across walls, tools. In flesh, its meaning we do not know, but its presence is everywhere. Imagine a grave, shallow, lined with reeds. A body curled, like one sleeping, arms folded, knees drawn close. Beside it, a stone tool. Not sharp, not functional, but chosen. Of a few beads, a shell. A handful of red powder gently pressed against the cheekbone. This is not accident, this is ritual. Something quiet and deeply known. Though the knowledge itself is now lost. Anthropologists and archaeologists have found such graves again and again. In the soil of Ukraine, in the dunes of Africa, in valleys swept by European wind. Different people, different tools, different animals, but always that same red stain. Some call it the color of life, the color of death. Perhaps both, perhaps neither. Perhaps the line between the two was softer then. In Cataluk, some graves contain not only pigment but figurines. Small, usually less than a hand in height, made of clay or stone, shaped into full-bodied women, wide hips, curved stomachs, closed eyes. These are not dolls, and they are not gods in the way we understand the word, but they are. Important, they are found often, not only in graves but in homes. It's buried in floors, hidden in corners. Some scholars call them mother goddesses. Others think they were charms, talismans, symbols of fertility, or food, or safety. We cannot be certain, or perhaps certainty was never the point. What we know is that they were handled. Worn smooth at the base, fingers rubbed over hips, until the stone itself softened. They were held, passed, kept close, and when a woman died, they were buried with her. Not for display, not for grandeur, but for something quieter. Perhaps comfort, perhaps memory, perhaps hope. And so these red ochre graves become something more than burial sites. They become windows. Faint, narrow windows into the way early people saw death, not as an end, but as a return to the soil, to the color, to the shape of the mothers who made the world. Some graves hold children, tiny bones barely formed, laid beside larger ones, perhaps a mother, perhaps a sister, a midwife. Pigment surrounds them both, a story told in silence. Elsewhere, stone tools are found, not chipped or used, but polished, placed just so, not weapons, not for hunting, but perhaps for guiding, a sense of journey, sending someone somewhere, even if there was no map, even if the destination was simply back to the earth. And still, we are left with questions. Why ochre? Why red? Why these shapes, these stones, these positions? Was it belief or comfort? Was it ritual or habit? The Neolithic left us no books, only bones, and dust, and pigment. But even these whispered, if you listen softly, these graves are not grand. They are not lined in marble, there are no inscriptions, no names, but there is care. There is choice. There is the unmistakable presence of love. Even now, when archaeologists brush away the soil, they pause when they see the red. It is a mark of meaning. Hush, a moment of respect, across time. So sleep now. In the knowledge that even 9,000 years ago, people still grieved, still hoped, still placed something beautiful beside the ones they lost. They still believed that color could carry memory. That pigment could hold peace. That something, even if it fades, could remain. In every human group, even the earliest ones, some gathered in circles to speak, and others knelt quietly at the fire to keep it burning. Tonight, we step gently between two kinds of warmth: the fire that led decisions, and the fire that fed the children. In the Neolithic world, there were no palaces, no thrones, no golden robes, but there was still power, still leadership, still hierarchy, though softer. Less visible to us now, there were hunters, shamans, elders, those who decided when to move the camp, when to trade, how to divide the grain, and there were those who made sure the grain was ground and cooked and stored. Imagine a small group of men seated around a central fire. The flames crackle low. Above them, the stars are quiet, watching. They speak in slow turns, not shouting, not hurried. They speak of weather, of tracks in the hills. Of another group, seen 2 valleys away. There is no written record, no signature, but decisions are made about safety, about direction, about who will carry what and when they will leave. Meanwhile, somewhere behind them, not far, but rarely invited to speak, a group of women bends over small fires of their own. The hearth, not one flame, but many, scattered, hidden behind walls of thatch or clay, feeding children, feeding the sick, feeding the men who make the decisions. The council fire is public. It belongs to the group. It is for policy, for protection, for vision. The hearth is private. It belongs to the family. It is for care, for warmth, for endurance. And yet, the hearth burns longer, steadier. It does not wait for consensus. It does not need to be wise. It only needs to stay lit. There is no evidence that Neolithic women were silent. In fact, some figurines showed them seated, arms raised as if in speech, but much of their power was not declared. It was lived. In when to plant, when to wean. How to store grain so that the child would not go hungry in winter. This is a power quietly exercised, without permission, without praise. And the contrast is not cruel. It is not rigid. It is a rhythm. A circle of decision makers and a circle of bread makers. One chooses the path. The other ensures that the feet can walk it. We know from bones and tools that both men and women worked, hunted, carried, cared. The division was not always sharp, flowed like the seasons, sometimes overlapping, sometimes separate. But still, there is something about the hearth that feels eternal. The place where ash gathers, where stories were told, where a mother wiped a child's face with the corner of her own garment. No history book records it. But the memory lingers. Even today, when we say home, we still mean a fire, a small one, with someone kneeling beside it. And so we drift now between those 2 fires. One high in speaking boldly, the other low in speaking through labor. And in that soft balance, the decisions of the tribe and the work of its women, the world kept moving forward, quietly, carefully, one ember at a time. When night fell in the Neolithic world, there were no clocks, no city lights, no bright screens to outshine the stars. It was only the sky. The cold, slow-moving stars above, the flicker of firelight, and often the soft silver pool of the moon. Tonight we step into the quiet realm of belief. Not religion as we now know it, with temples and texts, but something older, more rooted in the body, in the soil, in the moon's gentle rhythm and the cycle of life, especially as it passed through women. In the earliest settlements, the people lived close to the land. And so, they looked for meaning in the land cycles, the swelling of seeds, the flow of rivers, the return of the rains, and always, always in the rhythm of women's bodies and fertility. They did not separate the sacred from the everyday. The fire that baked the bread was also the fire that warmed the bones of the dead. The earth that bore the crops was also the earth that received the body in burial. The moon that marked the tides was the same moon that marked a woman's cycle. And over time, these patterns became symbols. Not drawn from books, but from repetition, from watching, from feeling. We find these beliefs not in writing, but in shape. In symbol, the Venus figurines with their rounded hips and full bellies. Some with incised marks around the chest or thighs, Perhaps counting days, perhaps tracking time, perhaps something else. We find small stones etched with crescents, bone tools carved with parallel lines. Some believe they were calendars, lunar records, marking the days between bleeding and not. There is no clear line between superstition and reverence, no sermons, no commandments. But there were gestures, rituals, that seemed to whisper across time. Ash sprinkled in a doorway, herbs hung from a lintel, a carved figurine buried beneath the floor of a home with a new baby. Were these spells, blessings, memorials? We do not know. And perhaps that unknowing is the point? Fire was sacred. It was not simply light, it was protection. It cooked food, it burned waste, it warmed bodies. It was tended carefully, it's passed down, taught, like a name, like a lullaby. To let the fire go out was not just careless, it was dangerous, it was taboo. Some groups believed that fire was a spirit, alive, watching, so it was fed, spoken to. Now cradled in clay bowls, wrapped in bundles of reed, carried from one settlement to the next like something holy. And then there was the moon. Its phases, bright, dim, gone, and back again, mirrored something intimate, something bodily, a woman's cycle. The ebb and return, the fullness, the release, was noticed, counted, honored, perhaps with songs, or quiet ceremonies beneath the stars. Perhaps with silence. We do not know if they had gods, but we know they had awe. And awe, in its softest form, is a kind of faith. They looked at the sky and saw patterns. They looked at birth and saw miracles. They looked at the old and knew they too would return to the earth. In Cataluk and other sites, some burials show women curled around infants. A final posture, protective. Still beside them, a carved figurine. A red mark. A circle drawn in the dust. Perhaps belief was not formal. Perhaps it was not taught, but simply lived, felt, handed down in the rhythm of work, the whisper of wind, and the softness of the moon. So now, as you lie still beneath your ceiling, your roof, your blanket, imagine those women, thousands of years ago, looking up at the same moon, feeling its rhythm, its marking time not in hours, but in cycles. Belief, for them, was not about being right. It was about feeling held by the earth, by the sky, by the firelight. Now, we step outside the home, beyond the hearth, beyond the council fire, into the wide world that surrounded Neolithic life. The natural world was not something they visited. It was not a view or a retreat. It was everything. It shaped every breath, every step, every hope. The people of the Neolithic lived slowly because the world moved slowly. There were no alarms, no minutes to count. Only the sound of birds returning, the shift of wind, the lengthening of shadow, the tilt of the sun. They watched the seasons the way we watch a clock, with quiet awareness, with patience. Spring was brief, but sacred. It brought softness to the air. The first green shoots, so fragile yet so needed. Birdsong returned. The ground grew tender again. The foragers set out with baskets over their shoulders, leaves, searching for the small that only grow in the weeks between frost and heat. Babies were often born in spring, not by planning, but by pattern, by the rhythm of long-ago winters. Summer came with fullness. The sun was stronger, the rivers shallower, the grain taller. People rose earlier, worked longer, gried herbs on flat stones, gathered nuts and roots, stored what they could. The huts grew hot, the insects thick, but the harvest was worth it. Evenings brought some relief. Families sat near the doorway with bowls in their hands. Upward watching the smoke curl stayed bright into a sky that until very late, autumn, was the season of wait. The sun sank faster, the air cooled, and the work grew urgent. Everything had to be prepared. Fires built higher, clay sealed tighter, grain hidden from rodents, tools sharpened, clothing patched, leaves turned, then fell. Children helped gather kindling. Mothers dried meat on racks. Elders checked baskets for mold. There was no rush, but there was no rest. The year was preparing to sleep, and so they did the same. And then came winter. Not just cold, but still. still in a way we rarely know today. Snow softened the earth. Smoke from every hut hung low in the air. The paths between homes narrowed as everyone stayed close to the fire. Meals grew simpler. Soup stretched with water. Stored berries turned dark and sour. But they ate because they had prepared. Stories were told more often. Not loudly, not always to entertain, but to remember, to pass the time, to mark the dark with voices. The animals grew quiet too, some gone entirely. Others tracked for their prints in the snow. Each hunt took longer, each day colder. Babies born in winter were wrapped tightly, held close. Songs were hummed over them, not words, just sound.
A rhythm.
Like a heartbeat, like footsteps in deep snow. Through it all, the natural world remained constant. And yet, it was always changing. The same tree, seen each season, was not the same. The same river shifted course after every thaw. And the people watched, listened, adapted, not with charts, not with numbers, but with memory. A tree that bore bitter fruit one year might be passed over the next. A bird that called early might mean an early storm. The curve of the moon against a certain wind meant something they did not write down, but knew. We find their tools now buried in mud. Flint blades, scrapers, fishing weights. Simple, effective, made from what the world gave them. They left no great walls, but they left footprints. Pressed into clay that hardened with time, still visible, still here. Imagine yourself standing with them, bare feet against cold earth, breath white in the morning air. A basket in your hands. It's a long path ahead. And above you, the same moon, the same sun. The same patient turning of time. There was no separation between people and place. No barrier between survival and season. Everything came from the world. And everything eventually returned to it. So now, as the hours stretch into quiet, and your body begins to rest, remember. Even the first humans found rhythm in the trees, the wind, the stars, and the slow, certain return of the sun. And now, as our long walk through the Neolithic world draws to a close, as the firelight dims and the ancient wind settles into stillness, you may begin to feel just how far we've traveled. Not quickly, not with urgency, but slowly, softly, as they once moved through their days. You've heard the rhythm of a life built not in glory but in quiet effort, the bending of backs, the grinding of grain, the tending of fires that could not be allowed to die. You've met women who left no names, it's only wear on their joints and pigment in their graves. You've touched their tools, have walked through their seasons, heard in silence what they may have believed about blood and moons and the place they would go when it was time to return to the soil. Their world was not kind. But it was not cruel either. It was simply what it was, and they endured it, together. So often, the history we are taught centers on those who built kingdoms, who fought wars, who left records. But most of humanity was built not by warriors or kings, but by mothers in the mud, by hands that scraped and stitched, kneaded and carried. Hands that stirred the stew and held the dying child. Hands that kept the fire alive. When everything else had gone quiet, tonight you remember them. Not with noise, not with ceremony, but with stillness. With breath, with rest. The modern world moves quickly, too quickly. We forget that time once passed in footsteps and weather and sleep. We forget that there is dignity in repetition, in effort, in simply making it to the end of another day. And so, as you lie here now, surrounded by quiet, warmed not by a hearth, but by something deeper, know that you are connected to something very old. A thread that winds back through mothers and stories and firelight. Thread that says, you are here because someone kept going. Someone rose in the dark and ground the grain and fed the fire. Someone whose name you do not know. Let that knowledge soothe you now. Let it settle on your skin like red ochre dust. Let it remind you you are not far from the very first hands that ever reached out and made a home. Sleep now. Rest, and carry their memory quietly into your dreams. They are still here, in the rhythm of your breath, in the warmth of the room, in the silence that follows a long, long day.